Well, hello, folks. I'm coming to you today from the den of my home where we raised our children. You see, over the last week and a half, I've been around a whole bunch of people in a whole lot of different places. I've even been on an airplane and was feeling a little tired. And given the fact that I'm 70 years old, my kids were telling me, Dad, come on, you're in that high-risk age group, so you need to be extra careful. So in an abundance of caution, we decided to just do my ministry to you today from my den, because I want everybody to be safe. I'm just here with one of my family members who has on the camera and has on the mask and the gloves to do this taping, because it's important that we be vigilant in protecting not only ourselves but the people we love and the people that we are around. So I'm coming to you in a little bit more intimate environment today to minister God's truth to you. Well, needless to say, we're in a major situation here, a major crisis. But this is more than just about a virus. This corona pandemic is also corona politics. It's corona economics and finance. It's corona government. It's corona sociology. It's corona, athletics. It's corona everything, because it has affected the systems of the world. This is much deeper. If you just are only seeing the virus, you don't see all that's taking place right now. And I want to talk to you today about a divine disruption. I want to tell you what's really going on. I shared with you last week the principle of how the world works. Let me repeat it. Everything visible and physical is preceded by that which is invisible and spiritual. So if you want to address that which is visible and physical, you must identify the cause and the cure to what is invisible and spiritual. Or to put it another way, if all you see is what you see, you do not see all there is to be seen. Something else is afoot here, and it is attached to the spiritual realm. That's why I want to read to you verses 5 and 6 of 2 Chronicles 15. This is what it says. It says, "In those times there was no peace to him who went out or to him who came in. For many disturbances afflicted all the inhabitants of the lands. Nation was crushed by nation and city by city, for God troubled them with every kind of distress." Here you have described a world in chaos. Individual lives were without peace. When they went home, there was family conflict. He says city rose up against city. There was community conflict. Then it says nation rose up against nation. There was international despair. And the common denominator through all of them was chaos, no peace. And I think you will agree, everybody's restless right now, afraid, nervous, insecure, no peace. But what ought to catch your attention is the end of verse 6 of 2 Chronicles 15. It says, "For God troubled them with every kind of distress." Wait a minute. God took the blame for what was happening? For God troubled them. God is saying, I'm behind your lack of peace and your disturbances. In the Old Testament, when God wanted to address the fact that people had departed from him, there would be judgment. With the death of Jesus Christ in history, God recast his relationship to the world. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 5, the world was reconciled to God through the death of Jesus Christ. So now, God doesn't rain down viruses, he doesn't rain down fire and brimstone. But we can experience what we'll call the passive wrath of God. That's described in Romans chapter 1, verses 24, 26, and 28. It says, "And God turned them over, and God turned them over," and the third time, "and God turned them over." Because they would no longer take him seriously, because they had departed from him, he just released them to let them see what life looked like without him. So he just, like a dog on a leash, and lets the leash go. He lets you run your own way from him, and then you run into the consequences of that abandonment. You see, what Romans 1 is describing is what happens when an individual, a family, a church, or a nation departs from him. It creates a vacuum. And we know nature abhors a vacuum. It will be filled with something. And the something that it is filled with, when God is not filling it, isn't too pleasant. I'd like to suggest to you the coronavirus is filling a vacuum due to the absenteeism of God. Now, we know God exists everywhere, but I'm talking about the relational absenteeism of God. And he says, you don't want me. You're going to have life without me. But you created a hole in which, boy, things are entering into it that you really don't want. What we need to understand is that what we're going through today, worldwide and individually, is a divine disruption. He is disrupting the normal, natural, and preferred order of things. No peace. They went home, no peace. Cities, no peace. Nations, no peace. This is worldwide because God is sending a worldwide message. What was the problem? There were three problems. There were three causes, if you will, of the chaos that they were going through and that we are going through in this crisis that we face. He says in verse 3 of 2 Chronicles 15, there was no true God. Now, he didn't say there was no belief in God. He said it was false. No true God. They had replaced the true God with idols and called it God. What is an idol? An idol is any noun, person, place, thing, or thought that you look to as your source independently of the true God. A true God is a false person, place, thing, or thought that becomes your point of reference. And that is called an idol in the Bible. The greatest sin in all the Bible is idolatry, because what you've done is remove God's exclusivity clause. No competitors allowed. When we adopt idols, and they can be sophisticated, they can be technology, money, people, relationships, they can be religion, all of those can be idols. Your career can be your idol, your education, your degrees can be an idol. Whenever that thing is placed alongside of or in front of the God who has revealed himself, it will be rejected by him. A distance will happen from him, and it will open up a hole for wrong things to enter into that space. You see, we like to use the name God. But if you're going to use his name, the information you give must be correct about him. You can't make up stuff, call it God, and think he's okay with it just because you have the right nomenclature. We're living in a day when God has been put on the loop, like those highways that go around the city. We want God close enough to be respectable, far enough not to be bothered with. We want to be able to reference him on Sunday, but we don't need his information, direction, decrees on Monday. We want to say we believe in him, but we're not dictated to by him. And so we don't wind up with the true God, even when we're praying, singing songs, and going to church. We often wind up doing it for an idol that we use the name God for. He said there was no true God. There was no real God. He had been replaced by false gods. But why? Why was there no true God? Well, verse 3 says, because there was a second problem. There was a void of teaching priests. It says there were no teaching priests. You see, in the midst of the pulpit is going to be a fog in the pew. When the pulpits fail and the pew becomes confused because of the pulpits failing, then the culture is not going to be led in the right direction. The problem is the failure of the church. Our churches have failed with thus saith the Lord. We've placated ourselves to the culture and dumbed down the deity by ignoring his word. We're not teaching what God says, we're teaching what we think. We're teaching people what feels good for them and to them. We're teaching what is preferred and what is popular. What we're not teaching is how God thinks and what God says and how God feels on every subject. You see, there are two answers to every question. God's answer and everybody else's. And everybody else is wrong. God has spoken and he has not stuttered. He's done that in his word. His inerrant, errorless book to speak to all issues for all of life. And he's wrong about none of them. He wants to, yes, tell you how to live your personal life. Yes. He wants to define your sexuality for you, not have you define it for yourself. Yes. He wants to define marriage and what it should be and what it should not be. Yes. He wants to define what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be parents, how children should respond to their parents. Yes, he wants to define that. He wants to define how religion is supposed to work, how churches are supposed to operate, and how governments are supposed to fare and operate for the citizenry. He wants to define all of that, especially since he says, I created governments. So when you go out and you create your own rules about any of those subjects or any other subject you come up with, you have insulted him. And when the pulpits fail to do that, when the pulpits are giving people votes on what God has said, like this is a majority rule situation, when it comes to what he has spoken about, then there are no teaching priests. And we're not conforming people to God's standard, we're just making them comfortable with their own standards, leading to all kinds of confusions that we've already seen in our lives, in our culture, and now in our calamity. He says, no, there was no teaching priest. No, God wants to speak into the issues of righteousness and justice, and how to handle the poor, and equity, and economics, and how to handle finances, and all of that he speaks about. And it's the job of the teaching priest to declare it, to speak it, yes, with love, but with clarity. There should be no uncertain sound from the pulpit, not when you're speaking on behalf of God. And his word must become the new standard. The old book must become the current standard, by which all issues are addressed, by which all people must conform, and by which all systems must be adjusted. No matter how high they go or how low they go, no matter whether they're political or social or economic or entertainment. When we take the true God seriously, and when pastors and preachers and leaders take what he says seriously and stop kowtowing to the culture and start speaking with spiritual authority and Holy Ghost guts, so that the people know God has spoken to you. And I'm going to conform it from church, and then I'm going to go public with it in society. Yes, letting people know we care, we love them, and we want their best. But the only way I can give you my best is to give it to you based on what God says. So we live in a world where the truth of God is being watered down, dumbed down. And so it's being camouflaged while we still quote verses or reference God. But the God of the Bible is being lost because we're leaving the Bible out while trying to keep God. You can't do it. God has raised his word above his name. You must take this word seriously. That is, if you want to take solutions seriously. This must mean that the pulpits must preach in such a way that it overrides what people think. It overrides what your mom and daddy taught you. It overrides what your professors have to say. It overrides what the media is trying to promote when it disagrees with him. Well, this is not a time for sermonettes. This is the time for serious communication of thus saith the Lord, without apology, but with love, with caring, with understanding, and with compassion. So we started off by saying there was no true God. The true God had been replaced by false religion. And that's because there were no teaching priests.